lucid dreaming and lucid dreaming to the afterlife. So the first thing to consider is that I believe when we dream at night, we astral travel. And we are attached to our astral body with a silver cord. So there's no reason to be concerned or scared that you might get lost out in the depths of the astral plane, because the silver cord will always pull you back to your physical body. I see the astral plane as kind of like a big lake, and part of the afterlife is a section of that lake, and I also see it as having different layers and dimensions. So there's a lower astral, middle astral, and a higher astral. That's how I see it. And I have looked into different dream theories. I agree with some people, and I don't always agree with everyone. Like, I don't agree with that if you remember your dream, that it's a message and that it's important. Like, I've seen memes like that, and I don't fully agree with that, because not all of our thoughts and ideas during the day are important. So not all of our dreams would be important either. Like, we have intrusive thoughts during the day. So sometimes if you ask me what I'm thinking about, sometimes it's nothing interesting or important. Sometimes I'm just running over things. So I think that also happens in some dreams. Some dreams are pointless from my experience. So not all of my dreams are, I think, meaningful. The astral realm, I see it as some kind of pliable ether that can be instantly affected by our thoughts and our emotions that shape our surroundings. And there's also different kinds of dreams. Some dreams can be a reflection of the day. Some dreams can be a reflection of what we think we're going to do the next day. Like when you go to sleep and you dream that you wake up and you get ready, and then you wake up and you have to do it all over again. And some dreams can be some of our fears coming to the surface for us to deal with, or sometimes they can be some lower astral entities get an idea of what our fears are, and they kind of use that to create a scenario for them to feed off of our fear, which is a whole topic in itself. And yeah, for when that happens, I would say what works for me is to keep up a daily spiritual practice and do psychic shielding for whatever method is working for me at that time. And feels like I've never heard anybody talk about that before, but sometimes I feel that vibe when I go into a dream that it's been set up by somebody else. But sometimes, sure, it's a manifestation of my own psyche and my subconscious. And even the idea of the subconscious mind in the traditional scholarly psychological textbook concept, I feel is still a magical idea that there's a version of us that is running our lives and observing everything and taking things literally and creating all these fantastic journeys for us to go through at night. That still sounds incredible and very mystical. So, even if people think it's just the subconscious mind, I still see that as something phenomenal. Some dreams can be not even from this life. They can be things that we are processing from our past lives. Like experiencing something you've never firsthand experienced in this life. An example would be once I had a dream that I was pregnant and I told my mom about it, and she's like, "Kayla, what's weird about that dream?" And I was like, "I don't know, everything." And she's like, "No, you've never been pregnant before. How would you know what that feels like? That must be a past life memory." And I was like, "Oh, wow, I've never thought of that." And there could be dreams where it's not even something that happened. It could be something that was in the subconscious of that life. Some subconscious fear that is still being played out, so it might have not been something that actually happened. And a very interesting concept is also the idea that sometimes we're not even dreaming for ourselves, but that we are processing things for the collective. I feel like I've had dreams like that where it's nothing I've seen on TV and people I've never met or scenarios I've never encountered, just really random stuff. And it was modern day, so it didn't seem like a past life because it was modern clothing and houses. So I was like, I think it might be something very collective that I'm processing. And then I saw an interview on Gaia TV where this lady said that happens, where people do work at night as processors for collective issues for other people. Or if you think about it, that could also be a past life collective dream possibility. So it could be current collective work or past life collective work. There's even parallel lives as well, which is very wild. It's a concept where people believe that our soul is kind of spanning different parallel lives, either in like the same scenario that we're in, the same body, like that there's multiple Kaylas, or that there could be pieces of my soul in a parallel life who is completely different from me, or perhaps someone just on this planet could also share the same oversoul as me, and potentially we have shared dream interactions. There's a lot of different theories of what is possible. I have a theory that I think a lot of people go through extraordinary things at night, but they just don't remember the extraordinary contact and visits with spirit guides and all sorts of incredible things, but that they just have experience where they're coming back into their physical body and they have like a mundane dream in a more earthly dimension. And that's the dream that they remember. So it's like they have a really profound experience with spirit guides, but then it's just like too distant from this earthly dimension. So as they descend back into their body, then they start just having like thoughts and ideas of what happened the previous day, or something that they've been concerned about, or something that's coming up. And that starts to, like, they start to go into like their own energy field and pick up on who they are and what's going on, and then they just remember that. But that these higher experiences are happening, but can just be out of reach. And that must be a funny conversation with spirit guides. They're like, too bad you're not going to remember all this knowledge we're laying on you right now. And you're like, yeah, sorry. I'm just going to dream about driving a car really weird, and that's all I remember. But I think we pick up on it on some level. We'll get some kind of wisdom or upgrade from the experience. We just don't fully remember how or when it happened. I've always been a very intense dreamer my whole life. I remember a lot of my dreams from when I was very small. Very vivid, very immersive. And the first lucid dream I can remember happened when I was in high school, where I just fully came to the realization that I was dreaming and that I can control everything around me. And I put my hands in the air and I made lightning strike. What I usually do now is I fly around, or sometimes I can go through walls or go through the floor and like teleport different places, and I do really cool stuff. So I try to go lucid as much as possible. A dream I had recently was that I was in a strange apartment building with all these complicated stairs and hallways, and I was having trouble finding my apartment. And in the lobby was a restaurant with a circular bar in the middle of the room. And when I walked into the restaurant, I suddenly went lucid. And another thing that I like to do when I go lucid is start to talk to people and interview them and ask them what they are, where they come from, and do they know that we're dreaming. So I asked this man at a table who he was, and he said to me, I've known you for a long time, through many lifetimes, but it's hard to explain. And I was like, because there's no such thing as time? And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, yep, that makes sense, alright, right on. I think he must have been some kind of spirit guide. And then I think I followed him outside, or maybe I just walked out by myself, I'm not sure, out to a park that was outside this apartment building. I started to fly up into the sky. Sometimes I like to see how high I can fly up. Sometimes I go fly up into outer space and look at the earth. But this time, when I was seeing how high I can go up, the park I was in was just this floating piece of earth on a floating rock, I guess, in this vast vacuum of space. I don't think I saw stars. And there were other floating parks of people having some kind of park dream. And I was just flying over all the different floating parks. It was very trippy. I keep a dream journal, but I don't keep up with it as often as I should. Sometimes my dreams are so weird, or they're strange and disturbing, and I'm like, I don't want to remember them. And then, yeah, so I kind of get out of the habit, but it's something I would like to get better at, to keep up with it, because when I mundane dream that I think is insignificant, then I'll notice that my entries following it, then they start to get to be more profound. It's like my theory that we might just remember a mundane dream, but then we had more profound experiences we forgot. I feel like when I give attention to the mundane dreams, then I surpass that frequency the following days and remember the higher dimensional dreams more accurately in the next coming days. I also like to draw little doodles in my dream journal. It's in a sketchbook because sometimes it's hard to put into words what I've seen, and it's easier to draw it. So, as far as the afterlife goes, my understanding is that different people will go to different places and have different experiences depending on where they're at or what their contract is or whatever is their path. So what I've experienced with lucid dreaming to the other side, to visit my mom or other people as well in my life, and animals too, what I've seen for them isn't going to be the same for everybody. I think we all kind of have our own journey and our own paths. So my stories of the other side, like, that doesn't speak for everybody what's going to happen or has happened with everybody. Everybody is on their own path. So this is just one of scenarios. But there are many truths to this experience. So when I see her, it's been comforting and also just a really interesting investigation, because I'm just curious about everything generally and just trying to figure it all out. Something that is pretty crazy is that, so I go there sometimes when I'm lucid, but what I've observed is sometimes she's lucid and we're talking, but sometimes I'm in a regular dream and I remember that she visited me and she seemed lucid, like she knew what was going on, but I don't break the trance of the dream. And sometimes I go to visit, I'm lucid, but she's not, and I have entered her dream. She doesn't know that she's in the dream realm, and sometimes she's under a trance, and I'm kind of observing her psyche, subconscious, or all those different types of dreams that I talked about. I'm suddenly like a visitor to her world. When she's come into my dream, sometimes I think she regrets it because like some of my dreams can be like pretty intense. Like I was in this big battle with all these bad dudes out on this big field, and she definitely didn't have dreams like that when she was alive. I've watched a lot of horror movies as a kid too, so like I think it had an effect on my dreams and my nightmares. So it was after this big battle I went through, and I came out alright. I fought these guys, and then I go through this gate where I finished the battle, and I saw her look all shooken up, and I was like, oh, that's crazy back there, and she was like, yeah. So I think she like regretted visiting me on that night to see like what I go through. So the first profound experience that happened with my mom transitioning was the last night that she was passing. My sister took over because I had been there for that weekend. My sister took a shift, so my mom is technically still here, but I feel like a part of her was already on the other side, and I was taking a bath with a candle, pull crystals to put in the bathtub. I do that on occasion. And I'm in the bathtub crying, and when I open my eyes, I look over and I see that the crystals were lined up on the rim of the bathtub. And I jumped back, water splash, and I was like, I didn't move those. I said it out loud. And I was like, what is going on? And then I jumped out of the tub and I went over to Lee, who was sleeping. I woke him up and I told him, and he was half awake, not given the right reaction for it. He reacted more to it the next day, but I was like, what is happening? Because if I move them, I would have individually been like, oh, rose quartz, I'll put that there. Oh, this, whatever it was, smoky quartz, I'll put that there. There would have been a process. I definitely didn't do that. I put them in the tub. So, I don't know if it was her, my spirit guides, or I've also heard just crystals themselves have a spirit of their own, and sometimes they can move around the house. So, I'm not sure what happened, but it was wild. Then the next day, one of my dogs was sitting on the bath mat and was looking at me, and then looking at the crystals, looking at me, looking at the crystals, looking at me, and I was like, I know. And then we, after she passed, then we went out of town and traveled upstate, northern, kind of northern California. That's when I did those Cambria videos of the moonstones on the beach and everything. We just got out of Dodge for a little bit. But yeah, that was very similar to what happened in high school. I don't know if you've seen the movie, the video of when the crystals from my room went into the doorway between the kitchen and the hallway, and it was in weird formation. It freaked my mom out. She thought I was pranking her, and I wasn't. So this is the second time in my life where my crystals have mysteriously moved on their own. And I think also, yes, that night she was transitioning, but I had a dream where I was at her mom's house with my grandma, and then the wall kind of opened up and we took off and we're flying, and I was kind of showing her how to fly, and she was like, oh, of course you know how to fly. Because she was always kind of impressed with all the mystical things that I can do. Because, yeah, I would tell her my dreams when I was growing up. And one time she was like, Kayla, not everybody dreams like you. I'm like, really? She's like, no. That, I've never had dreams like that. So she was always kind of amazed and impressed with my out there stuff that I do. Something I like to practice and research and experience is shamanic journeying, which, by the way, I'm going to be hosting shamanic journeys through my website, Cosmictingles Healing Center. So if you want to head over there and subscribe to the email list. And yeah, I have some cool events coming up soon that I'm going to be launching. So something with shamanic journeying is it's very common to get a spirit animal or a spirit guide. I'm sure you've heard the term before. So shamanic journeying is kind of dreaming while you're awake, while you're under a trance, and it could be done sober as well. Because a lot of people think that it's only through plant medicine, but it can be done sober too, which It's very cool. So, one night, while I was dreaming, I met my spirit animal, or my spirit guide. The dream is that I was walking up the street from where I lived, and there was this big, I thought it was a dog at first, but the more I thought about it, it makes more sense that it would be a wolf. But big. It almost looked like, I don't know, 8 feet long. Like a big, white, fluffy wolf. I thought it was a dog because it was so friendly, and I wasn't afraid of it. Like, I thought it was a white German shepherd, but just like extra big because I was in a dream. Even for a wolf, I don't think they get that big. But yeah, so I came across it, and in the dream I was crying. And I looked at him, and I was like, "Are you my spirit guide?" And he like walked over, and he was being all cute. And then I asked him, "Can you bring me to my mom?" And he kind of, I guess he like nodded. I don't remember. I didn't write these down, so this is all from like recall. And this was like 5 years ago, I think. I don't know, time's weird. And so I got on his back, but I'm pretty sure I did animal shape-shifting, where I morphed into this magical spirit wolf, because I wasn't aware of him being on top of him anymore. Like, I wasn't like grabbing fur, looking at the back of his head. Suddenly it was just like I was a little bit above the ground, but I was just coasting, and I wasn't in control of the coasting. Like, he was driving the experience, but I wasn't aware of his presence. Like, but I could still talk to him telepathically, though, as well. It's a very interesting sensation. So I was just coasting along the ground, and I was completely lucid as well. So it was very difficult to be in this fantastic shape-shifting, flying kind of situation and not wake up. That's the trick for lucid dreaming, is to like keep yourself very calm, because sometimes you're like, wow, like your mind's getting blown, and then you wake yourself up because like you get so excited or surprised, or just the sensation of everything. And so I was telepathically talking to him, and I was like, okay, come on, hurry, because I didn't want to wake up. And what we were experiencing was him almost sniffing out where she was located on the astral plane by going through places that she's lived and objects that she's owned. It's very interesting. So it'd be like one of her past apartments, and we would kind of like go around, and then it would fold over like a Spike Jonze movie, or just like a theater set that was just rolling and undulating before us. So it wasn't even like, we weren't even like moving that much. It was almost like the set around us was rolling and folding back. And suddenly another wall folded down, and it opened to a basement that I've never been to before. Like a nice finished basement with a carpet and a couch. And then it was that I was standing behind where there were stairs and like a wall. And I heard my mom coming down the stairs and kind of being like, ooh, ooh, ooh. The kind of like sound you make when you're like trying to like go to the bathroom quickly. And I like heard her. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I saw her put down a basket of laundry on a table and then go into a bathroom. And then she came out pretty quick. And then she was so surprised to see me. And I was like, just like, I miss you so much. And she's like, I know, I miss you too. And like, I love you and everything. Just, the usual things you would say. I don't think the conversation got too much further than that. Then suddenly I wasn't able to hear her. But, and I know a little sign language, so this means like deaf in sign language, so I kind of was just like, I can't hear you. And she was like, oh, okay. And then we were kind of like waving, and then suddenly I started sliding back without my control. And since I've had this dream, I found out that that's called the pullback, and that's when the silver cord is pulling you back into your physical body. But that wasn't the actual first time that I saw her in a lucid dream. The first time was that I was dreaming I was at her mom's again. My grandma, I call her Omi, and she was standing there, and there was some kind of high table, like a bar, in this room in the dream that doesn't really exist in that house in real life, and she was eating chocolate cake, and she offered me some, and I was like, no, I can't, I'm vegan. And then I'm watching her, and suddenly I go lucid, like fully lucid, like this is the first time I experienced her, and I was like, oh my god, Mom, like you're here. And she's like, yeah. She was actually all cool before, just like sitting there eating cake. She was wearing a long white dress and a crystal on a long chain around her neck that she didn't have in real life. What's interesting about that is I was talking to my niece, who I didn't tell about this dream. She had a vision of seeing my mom, her grandma, with the crystal around her neck as well. So I was like, but that's what she was wearing when I saw her too. She was telling me that she was traveling by train with a group of people at that time. So this is when it gets interesting, that the afterlife is more realistic to the earth plane than I had initially thought. I always thought as the afterlife as being more strange and cloud-like and like etheric and abstract in a way. And I also kind of assumed that when people would pass over that they became like enlightened and would just be very kind of saintly acting, but her personality when I've seen her was still her. Like, I saw her another time when I asked her about the people she was traveling with in the train. She was like, yeah, they were really messy. It's like she still has like, you know, her sass to her. And that's what I think is kind of surprising, that people will still have their quirks and their personality. They don't just become like angelic acting just because they're on the other side. Like maybe they do over time. Side thought, just right now, also it's interesting to think of past lives, and that there's a piece of us I feel that exists on the other side. So imagine you can like do a seance or do a channeling of your own past life self. It's just that this whole concept I find fascinating. So another time that I went lucid with seeing my mom was that I just suddenly floated down. I don't know what I came from before that. Like if there was a previous scenario, dream happening, or the start of the dream was that of me floating down and landing in a library. And right after I got there, like another group of people, like different generations, I remember there were kids, landed and walked next to me. And my mom was sitting at a table talking to a woman who was kind of like a librarian. And she was giving an assignment to my mom to look through the books on Earth and find which ones were positive, like gave her positive feelings about Earth, like spark joy, basically. And the lady was like, I'll give you a hint, like go to the animal books. And I feel like it was a way to do some kind of like therapy in a way, because my mom had issues with depression and all sorts of different things, as a lot of people do, and I just think it was interesting. And I had this dream before I had ever heard of the Akashic Library or the Akashic Records. The Akashic Library is a way that people interpret the Akashic field, which is the ether that is everywhere, and it records every thought, action, and event that has existed on Earth. And we all have a book of life, and it's very, very interesting topic. I went to a seminar in Sedona with Bill Foss, and I also got his book, which is great. I'll put a link in the description for it. He's awesome. I've seen him on Gaia TV in interviews. And when I told him about this dream, I thought it was very cool. He's like, wow, that's amazing. So I'm pretty sure if Bill Foss thought it was the Akashic Library, then that's a good indication that it was. So there was at one point where I thought maybe I should take a break from trying to see my mom, because it was getting a little intense, my dream life at that point, from doing shamanic journeys before bed and falling asleep while in a journey. It was just making my dream life a little too intense, and at that point I hadn't been doing enough psychic shielding and daily spiritual practice for me to deal with the kind of attention I was getting in the astral realm with like lower astral beings. So I was like, alright, maybe I should, take a break from visiting my mom. And then I had a dream where I was in some basement, but not like a finished basement like where my mom was, but like a spooky, dingy basement with like a cement floor, and over this railing type thing I was looking in, and there was a collection of clay sculptures, like little clay sculptures, and I was like, oh, my mom used to sculpt with clay, like all these sculptures make me think of her. Alright, I want to see her. And I like made a declaration, like I want to go see my mom because I miss her. These clay sculptures make me think of her. And then as I like made the decree that I wanted to go see her, all of a sudden I floated to the ceiling, like without my control. I wasn't trying to fly. Floated to the ceiling, and this has been kind of like a reoccurring experience in my dream life since I was little, where sometimes I get moved around in dreams without my control, and I usually kind of like freak out from it, and like try to stop it, like grab onto stuff. But this time I just submitted to the experience, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna relax and like see where this takes me. So I floated up, and then went to the ground, and then was sliding along the ground, and then was going feet first into a strange fireplace that didn't have any fire or wood or a log holder in it. I went feet first and went through the back of it into complete darkness, and I'm fully lucid for this. I also kept my cool while I was in darkness. I just kind of floated, like kind of like Alice in Wonderland. It felt like floating through potentially the void, or potentially my astral eyes were closed. I've heard of that happening. That sometimes when it seems like you're in blackness, that you're actually just with your eyes closed. And the fireplace makes me think of stargates that they have in ancient ruins, which I think is potentially something to that, with like a sacred geometry. Something with squares or rectangles can create portals. And as I floated down through darkness, and then suddenly I was over a city, and it was either sunset or sunrise. Like the sun was low and the sky was orange, and I just like gasped because I was just like in total darkness. And I was like really trying not to wake myself up, just like completely taken back from everything I'm seeing. And I still was like just along for the ride, floating on some kind of like invisible platform, it felt like, just slowly descending down into the city street. And I was standing there, and again, just like in the library, another family with all different generations with kids landed next to me, walked down the sidewalk. So there's something with that. Or maybe just a coincidence, I don't know. And then I look over, like some people, like the crowd parted a little bit, and I thought I saw my mom sitting on a bench, like that was a man was sitting in front of her, and I was like, is that my mom? I run over, and I'm like, I found you. It was my mom. And I was like, what are you doing here? And she was like, I can kind of like get the gist of what's going on sometimes without her telling me. Like it's like the claircognizant, I just get like a psychic knowing of like what is the situation. Was that there was like a store next to the bench, and there was like a line going into the store, and it was like people were waiting around for things. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm waiting for a temporal ear. So this is when it gets weird. I didn't know what a temporal ear was. I woke up and I like looked it up, and like, oh my god, it's a real part of the ear. Like, what the heck? Like, I know I did like an ear video, but that was like however long ago in New York. And I definitely didn't remember it. Like, I'm not really good at remembering vocabulary, like medical vocabulary like that, like science vocabulary. So I can tell you, because when I woke up, I'm like, temporal, like, I thought of time. I didn't know that there was part of the ear was temporal. And then I remembered that she did have a weird ear thing. That in the 80s, she had an ear infection that got whack, and her ear would give her issues every now and then, where she would have to put like cotton in it if it was on a windy day or something like that. So I was like, oh my gosh, she did have an ear thing, that's right. I was talking to her on the bench, and even when I'm lucid, sometimes things are like a little blurry around me. But I was like looking at her, and her face got very like high definition, like fully looking at details of her. And she was looking at me, she was like, you shouldn't really look me in the eyes for that long. And I don't really know why she said that. I don't know if there's some unspoken kind of thing I don't know about, some rules or whatever, or she was kind of just saying that maybe it'll wake me up. That it was like too visceral, perhaps, and it was going to make me like wake up from my dream. And then the same experience happened where suddenly I was sliding back, And she was kind of just like waving, and I was like, oh man, I was like sliding back on the sidewalk because of that astral travel pullback experience with the silver cord bringing me back into my physical body. And then another time after that, I had a dream. I was driving down the street in some kind of city, and I heard her calling my name. And suddenly she like came from around the corner, was like waving. And then she came into my car. She's sitting in the passenger seat. And she was wearing a white dress that had like these little cutouts in it, kind of like I guess like a doily kind of pattern. And I was like, what? How did you get that dress? Like, is it like a dress shop, or do you like think about it and it appears? And she's like, yeah, I think about it. Like I could create it with my thoughts. And I was like, wow. And then we started talking about the experience of meeting up when I saw her on the bench. And she's like, you're so mystical. I couldn't believe it when I saw you just floating down like that. I can't believe you found me. And I was like, yeah, it might have been in like a lower dimension because I had to float down to get to you. And she was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So she's kind of like figuring things out too while she's there. Hi, this is Editing Kayla. I realized I didn't mention how I think it's interesting that my mom was getting her ear worked on. So apparently some spirits on the other side, they get physical rehabilitation for things that they experienced on Earth. And I've also experienced while astral traveling that I've looked down and seen mosquito bites that I had in real life. So there's some kind of connection as well to the astral body and the physical body, I believe. And I've also experienced that things that we go through on the astral plane and our astral body can also affect our physical form as well. So it's a give and take sometimes. I also forgot to mention how I once was lucid and asked my mom about the city that I saw her in, and she goes, no, that wasn't a city, that was a terminal. And I got a vision of like Port Authority in Manhattan. So it's more of a in-between place, like a transitional place, not a place where people live, even though there were high rises and I assumed people lived there, but it's just more of like a port or an in-between place. I also just wanted to mention that I forgot to say, each time I have a dream about my mom, I don't always think it's specifically her spirit. Sometimes it can be my psyche experiencing a memory or having her as an archetype, or sometimes it can be an astral actor. I guess I can get into that some other time. Like when you have a dream, you're like, yeah, I had a dream about you, but it wasn't you. Those are what I've experienced to be astral actors. And I've also encountered a lower astral entity who has pretended to be my mom as well once, but I didn't fall for it. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in here real quick. Back to the video. And I think this is when I asked her about the group she was traveling with in the train. And yeah, when I saw her in that house, when she was carrying the laundry basket, I could hear people upstairs and like walking and talking. So it was almost like she was in some kind of group house living situation as well. So in my car is when she told me that the people in the train were messing. So it's just like, that's so like her to make like a sassy remark. And then I started started to wake up from the car. And this was wild. I was in a hypnagogic state when you're not awake yet, but you're not sleeping either. It's kind of in between. And you kind of feel like sleep paralysis, but like not spooky. Kind of like when you like fall asleep watching TV and you can still kind of hear the TV and you hear people talking around you, but you're sleeping. It's like a weird in between state. And have you guys experienced that? Let me know. So in this hypnagogic state, which is a really amazing place to get messages and telepathic conversations with all sorts of entities, and that's when I had a telepathic conversation with a gnome, by the way, that I referenced in my pie video. I was serious about that. And so in the hypnagogic state, I saw like the back of my eyes, I guess. You know, like when you have your eyes closed, I saw like the static of having my eyes closed. But then it was almost like seeing a pink digital artistic drawing of my mom's face in the static in my mind's eye. And I was still able to talk to her. So I was like still asking her questions because, you know, I want to know what she's going through. Like, what's it like for her? But all I got to ask her was, I was like, so do you eat? Because, you know, I was still thinking about when I saw her eating chocolate cake, and she was like, yeah, I can eat. I was like, do you go to the bathroom? She's like, yeah, I can. So, the afterlife isn't what I thought entirely. I've heard also people say that there's like this life review that happens, and then you move on to another phase of the other side. So there could be, you know, a lot more for me to learn about for what it looks like. Also, she's not the only person that I've experienced in the astral afterlife. When I went to that Bill Foss seminar in Sedona, we did a group akashic reading where he did a guided meditation and led us, and he also did an attunement on me, well, everybody in the class, to be able to access the akashic records and do akashic readings, which is really cool. And through the guided meditation, we did a healing of our ancestors, including like living ancestors, which is, you know, parents, siblings, but also the family line, like going back through our bloodlines. And afterwards he was like, a lot of times after people do this experience, they get reached out to by relatives that they haven't heard of in a while. Like some aunt or something will reach out of the blue, and that they pick up on it on some level. But what happened to me was, like a day or two later, I had a dream that I was sitting in church, and then I went lucid, turned around and saw my grandparents, my mom's parents, who I called Omi and Opa. But they were younger than I've ever seen them, or maybe when I was a baby, but no, I think younger than even when I was a baby. Like my grandma, I remember her cheeks were really rosy, and my grandpa, who was so sweet, but the whole time that I knew him, he was quite quiet, and my mom said, like, ever since the war, he's been kind of like out of it. He was a Morse code operator in World War II. So, yeah, he was always kind of, he was a little out of it, but in my dream, he was lively and cognitive, and we were both so happy. And that was really, really beautiful to see them like that together. And they're both on the other side. And I've been able to also visit or have visitations from pets. Sometimes just making the intentions that you want to see a loved one is what it takes to have contact. It doesn't have to be anything like elaborate, like doing a shamanic journey before bed. Sometimes just saying out loud or making the intention. And for people who don't remember their dreams that well or that often, I would recommend keeping a dream journal or saying the mantra before bed, or like just throughout the day, like, I'm a vivid dreamer, I'm a person who remembers my dreams. And yeah, even if you just remember like a color when you wake up, or one person, or one scenario, or setting, just write it down, and hopefully over time you'll become more and more. And there's also potentially some blocks for when people have a scary dream at some point when they're young or something, that they kind of like shut down that part of their lives, that they're like, I don't want to like visit that, I don't want to remember my dreams. So sometimes it's a good practice to go back to the last dream that you remember and see what happened there, and see if there's anything that needs attention or healing. And maybe, yeah, that contract or declaration can be voided. And also to go lucid, a good practice is throughout the day, I like to say, like, am I dreaming? Is this a dream? And then you're more likely to question on a regular basis, and then it hopefully will happen when I'm dreaming. And yeah, also realizing that the spirit realm and spirits and things like that can kind of be spooky to some people, but remembering that they're just people that are somewhere else. And just as how we're not scared of people on Earth, well, I guess we're scared of some people on Earth, but we're not scared of all people on Earth, and like there's no reason to be scared of all people on the spirit realm. They're just people, that they just are somewhere else. And I think that's very comforting, as kind of like a philosophy mantra that I have when I get sad about my loved ones that have passed on, and I'm just like, they're not gone, they're just somewhere else. And I also have a mantra that when I get sad and like the grief comes, I like take a deep breath and I'm like, I will see them again. I will see them again. As we will, either in the dream realm or when we're on the other side, or if the veil starts to thin more and both dimensions start to blend more and we're all just really powerful psychics that can just see through dimensions, then we'll be able to see them again, or when we're on the other side as well. The grief will still come, but it gives me something to focus on other than the grief, and yeah, to kind of give myself a breath and a reminder. That was it was a pretty long video, so amazing if you made it to the end. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed these stories, and I hope you found them comforting and interesting. Let me know your lucid dream experiences. I love hearing people's dreams, or if you have any ghost stories or spirit stories, anything that you'd like to add to the conversation, I'd love to hear it. And I'll see you soon.